Today I review a movie that's a cure for itself. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2017 movie Insomnium. This is the first full-length film directed and written by Scott Powers. It's his freshman debut, and bearing that in mind, I'm not going to bury the lead. This movie was not my favorite. I am going to have some harsh criticisms for it, but considering that it was Scott Powers' first film, I'm going to be taking that into account during this review, not in any scoring fashion, but I think when I kind of dissect this film, it's going to be a little bit more on a constructive criticism point of view. But regardless, what I found with this one is an hour and 21 minute long snoozer. This was just boring from start to finish, and it took me a little bit to figure out exactly why. But once I figured it out and once I nailed it down on a technical level, the rest of the pieces kind of clicked into place, and the movie unfortunately did not improve, but I had a better understanding of why I was feeling about it the way that I was. So this has the three principal characters in it of George, Finn, and George's girlfriend, Kim. And George had just recently broken his leg. He's infirmed. He's on temporary leave from work. And when he gets home, they have a bit of a party, just some close friends gathering around, and of course they break out the Ouija board. And of course, after using the Ouija board, strange things start happening, to Finn especially. And the movie pretty much takes place with Finn not able to sleep, George witnessing him sleepwalking, and trying to figure out what's going on. Now, if you start watching this movie yourself, I think you're going to notice what I did is that about 5 or 10 minutes into it, there's going to be this weird flat feeling that you can't quite put your finger on. And here's what it reminded me of. Years ago, decades ago, forever ago, I'm an old man, especially in the world of YouTubers. I took a creative writing course, and it was fantastic. I enjoyed it a lot. And it was kind of an interesting way for my late teenage me to express myself. And there would be a rotation going around where a group of 3 or 4 of us individually would write our own short stories and distribute them to the class. Our homework would be to read them, and the next day we would discuss it as a class, those 3 or 4 stories, and then take home the homework for the next 3 or 4 people. And my turn came up. I wrote a story. Everybody seemed to really enjoy it, but there was something about it they couldn't put their finger on, something about it that felt a bit flat. And there was a lot of discussion going around the classroom, and everybody was, like they were entertained by it, but nothing really, there was something about it that was lulling. And finally, the professor stepped in, and she explained it. She's like, okay, I see what you're all getting at, and here's the technical reason for it, is my sentence structure, being the inexperienced writer that I was following a fairly similar format for every sentence, like noun, verb, adjective, noun. And when that repeated itself, it caused a rhythm that I wasn't intending to happen and it became boring. Even though the subject matter and the characters, from what everybody was saying, was engaging, the read of it as a practice was becoming boring. And that taught me to really kind of punch up my grammar and shift things around and work on my sentence structure accordingly. And the reason that I bring that up is because it applies to this movie perfectly, not in the grammar sense, but in the visual storytelling sense. If you look at almost every shot, it is one character centered in the middle of the frame delivering their dialogue to another character, and as soon as their sentence is over, it would flip over to the other character who would be centered in frame that would deliver their dialogue. And that's how full conversations happen, no matter how many people were in the room. And that's pretty much how it went. It was almost like watching an unentertaining version of the Smokers Roundtable of that 70s show. And it made for a very visually dull movie. And when you have that kind of combined with the story premise that is tired and cliched, and, another Ouija movie with, this like slightly different element to it in the end, it just made for a dull watch that was a bit tough to get through. Even though this was an hour and 21 minutes long, which is relatively short for a full-length motion picture, this felt very long. I had to attack it in batches because I was just kind of not nodding off, but I was getting there, and I had to break away, take a walk and reapproach, because I don't review movies until I finish them. I make that a standard practice. So I think that I'm going to go ahead and throw up the scores, as always, 4 different categories. Each category is worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And you may see that the intent and the technical are the highest suffering scores there, and they kind of tie in with one another. The technical portions of this one, if there was anything salvageable with this particular storyline, it was completely destroyed by the technical elements of this film. The director of photography needs a spanking immediately, and that for the reasons that I kind of explained. And then there were other technical issues going on there. The sound editing was very inconsistent, and that kind of led for some weird scenes. There was one in which the character of George was breaking into another apartment, and all of a sudden this kind of chorus operatic kind of it was just very peculiar. And I think one of the best examples of a way that this is done well is if you look at The Silence of the Lambs, which I know is a high bar to reach, but even so, bear with me. The scene in which the killer is getting the girl into the van by pretending to have a broken arm and trying to get the couch in the van. If you watch that scene, look it up on YouTube, but watch that particular scene. The score really made it. It installed that sense of dread, that sense of foreboding, that sense of don't do it. And it stayed consistent so that when things peaked and he started, the tide had turned and he revealed himself to her, when the volume picked up, the score complemented the scene from start to finish. And in this case, the sound design of the scenes in Insomnium just didn't really match. It didn't service the film at all, and it just felt out of place and odd, and almost like they managed to get the rights to put the, whatever music they found in the film, and were just excited to do so and plopped it in. So trying not to derail myself too far here and kind of going back to the constructive criticism portion of this, as far as what could make Insomnium work, I think it honestly just needs a lot more experience. I think the script needed more experience to it. It needed many, many more drafts, a lot more input from peers and so on. The visual style needed a lot more experience and polish, and I think my recommendation to Scott Powers, if I were to have any, would be to take a film studies class and really be open to introspective dissection of films in terms of, what scene worked and why, and not necessarily plagiarizing that, but take those technical elements that you've learned and apply them to your experience and your filmmaking style. Find your own voice, but take some singing classes too. I know this review has been harsh, the score especially, and honestly that's just because everybody is on the same playing field, be it Insomnium or The Exorcist. As far as my scores go, I don't pull punches. It's just my honest assessment of a film. But I will also be honest and say that Scott Powers, if you're watching this, if you're listening, don't stop making movies. I know this review has been harsh. I know that my honest assessment of Insomnium is not one that is very flattering, but I want to see more come out of you. I want to see more with what you can do with more experience, and the only way to get more experience is to just go out there and keep doing it, keep plugging away. I did not like this movie, but I'm curious to see what your next one's going to be. So with that, and a score of 19 out of 100 points, that's my review of 2017's Insomnium. I really thank you for joining me here today. Please remember to like and subscribe, and if you want to support me further, my Patreon link is below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.